If only the villagers knew why the river kept returning the chief's daughter, they would have stopped going there.
Before I tell you this story, listen carefully. What happened in the village of Omi did not begin with the girl in the water. It began long before she was born, with a secret, a bargain, and a price nobody wanted to pay. On the morning our story opens, the whole village woke to screaming, the kind that pulls your legs out of bed before your eyes are open, the kind that makes old women drop their brooms and run. They found her at the riverbank. Zina, the chief's daughter, lying in the mud, soaked from her hair to her bare feet, river weeds wrapped around her ankles like dark green fingers. She was alive. Her chest moved. Her eyes were wide open, staring at the sky like she had seen something below that no living person was meant to see. This was the third time the river had returned her. The crowd stood back, trembling and whispering. Nobody dared touch her at first. And at the edge of that crowd, watching with eyes too sharp for her own good, stood a poor fisher girl named Amara. She noticed something nobody else did. Black beads, tied tight around Zina's ankle, the kind only poor mothers used. Why would the chief's daughter wear those? Amara knew those beads well. She had worn the same kind as a small child. Cheap, simple, the kind poor families tied on babies to chase away evil. She pressed the question deep into her chest and walked home. Home was a cramped hut that always smelled of fish smoke and damp cloth. The walls were thin. The mat was thinner. Her mother lay in the corner, coughing the same dry cough she had carried for 3 years. Amara set down her empty basket and looked around. Cracked bowls, a dying fire, a torn wrapper hanging over the window like it had given up. She was tired of this life, tired of people wrinkling their noses when she passed, tired of being the girl who smelled of dried fish and old mud, tired of watching the good life from a distance, like a hungry child pressing her face against a closed door. That evening, she climbed the hill behind the hut. From there, she could see the chief's compound far below. Warm lanterns glowing, soft music rising, the smell of real food drifting up. She stared at it for a long time. Then she whispered to no one but the dark sky, "One day, I will enter that place." Her best friend, Toma, heard her say things like that too often. He was a quiet boy with serious eyes and the kind of face that always looked like it was carrying a warning it had not yet spoken. He had grown up beside Amara at the riverbank, both of them poor, both pulling fish from the same cold water. But where Amara looked at the chief's compound and felt hunger, Toma looked at it and felt something cold and wrong. People who rise too fast in this village never rise clean, he told her the next morning, mending torn nets by the water's edge. Amara laughed. "You always say that, because it keeps being true," Toma said. "That river is not blessing anyone. It is warning everyone. Think about Zina. 3 times now." Mara shrugged and kept working. But later that night, she could not sleep. She lay on her mat listening to her mother breathe and kept seeing Zina's open eyes, the black beads, the river weeds coiled around her feet. She was still thinking when drums started, distant, slow, coming from the river. She sat up. Through the cracked window, a single lantern moved along the bank, far below, where no one should be walking at that hour. 3 days later, she met the woman in silk. Her name was Lady Said. She arrived at the morning market the way weather changes. Everyone noticed her without being sure exactly when she had appeared. She wore smooth cloth the color of deep water and moved like someone who had never been rushed a day in her life. Her voice was low and calm, the kind that made you lean forward to catch every word. She walked slowly between the market stalls and stopped in front of Amara. She looked at her the way a careful woman looks when measuring the distance between what something is and what it could become. "You have a quick mind," Lady Sedi said. "I can see it. And you are bold. Not many girls hold my gaze." Amara said nothing. But she did not look away. "Come work inside the chief's compound, as helper and companion to his daughter." Toma appeared at Amara's elbow almost immediately. "Don't," he said quietly. Lady Sedi looked only at Amara. Her expression did not change. "Poor girls do not get many doors," she said. "This one is open now." She turned and walked away, leaving the words standing between them like smoke. Amara walked through the chief's gate on a Tuesday morning, and the world changed. The floor inside was polished so smooth she could see her own face in it. Sweet incense hung in the air. Silver trays caught the light. Side rooms held beds piled with cloth so thick they looked like clouds. She had never seen anything like it. But she noticed other things too. The servants spoke in careful, low voices. They kept their eyes down. When someone passed the corridor near the back, conversation stopped mid-sentence. The way people stop when they realize they are being watched. And no one mentioned Zina's name unless they had to. When they did, they said it quickly and moved on, like touching a hot pot and pulling back. That evening, Lady Sade showed her to a small room and sat with her. "You will keep Zina calm? Keep her company. She needs someone steady. Is she unwell?" Amara asked. Lady Sade smiled, the kind of smile that answers nothing. "There is one rule," she said. "No one goes near the river after dark." She stood to leave. Especially not Zina. She did not explain why. The door closed softly, and Amara sat alone, listening to the distant sound of water. Zina's room was the finest in the compound. Silk wrappers on the walls. A carved chair by the window. Woven mats in red and gold. But in the middle of all that beauty sat Zina, dressed like royalty, hands folded, looking like a girl wearing a costume she had not chosen. Her hands trembled slightly. Her eyes moved too fast, checking doorways, windows, shadows. Amara sat across from her and waited. "You are the new one," Zina said. "Yes." "How many doors did she open before offering you this one?" "Just this one," Amara said. Zina looked at her. She must want something quickly then. They sat quietly. Birds called outside. Then Zina said, very softly, "I dream of drowning every single night. I am at the bottom of the river and I cannot come up." She paused. "Do you think water can hate?" Amara had no answer. She looked down at the floor between them. There, under Zina's bed, were wet footprints on the dry, polished floor. But Amara had not heard Zina move. The footprints faced the wrong direction, as if something had walked out from the wall and stood beside Zina's bed while she slept. In the weeks that followed, Amara kept her eyes open. She watched how the compound worked. She watched Lady Sade move through it like a woman tending a garden, always pruning, always planting, always careful about what she let grow. And slowly, she began to see the cracks beneath the shine. The chief's famous gold jewelry returned to a city trader after each feast. The musicians who praised him so loudly were paid to come from outside and paid more to spread good stories afterward. The gifts he gave important visitors were borrowed and quietly taken back. His power was a performance, beautiful outside, hollow in the middle. Lady Sade caught her watching one afternoon. "I see your eyes working," she said. Amara said nothing. Lady Sade leaned close, voice dropping. "Powerful men are not protected because they are strong, but because everyone around them has decided to believe the show." She let that settle. Then she said quietly, "Nothing stays beautiful unless someone pays." She turned and walked away. Amara stood in the empty corridor, turning those words over slowly. Someone pays. She thought of Zina's shaking hands, the wet footprints, the black beads on a rich girl's ankle. Someone was always paying. She just could not yet see who. Just 1 month after she arrived, Lady Sade dressed Amara for the harvest festival. Deep orange and brown wrapper, soft slippers, glass beads that clicked when she moved. Sweet oil behind her ears, and her hair wound up high. Amara stood before the brass mirror and barely recognized herself. Lady Sade looked over her shoulder. "That is what you can be. Remember it." At the festival, something happened that Amara was not prepared for. The crowd gasped softly when she walked in. Not loud. A slow, quiet wave moving through the people like a cool breeze. Heads turned. Conversations paused. These were the same people who had looked past her at the market. The same women who had wrinkled their noses. The same men who had laughed at the poor fisher girl. Now they smiled and greeted her warmly, as if they had always liked her. Amara moved through the crowd with her tray, keeping her face still. But inside, something lit up, warm and bright and hungry, like dry wood finally catching real fire. Later, she caught her reflection in a polished tray and understood something very honest about herself. She recognized the hunger in her own eyes, and she knew clearly that she never wanted to return to that smoky hut again. After the festival, the village could not stop talking about her. Women said she had used something to rise so fast. Men said she was smarter than she looked. Young girls copied her rapper style. Old women said nothing good comes to a poor girl that quickly. Amara heard everything. She told herself she did not care. But each morning she pressed her wrapper more carefully. She walked taller through the compound halls. Each compliment was food she had not known she was starving for. At dinner one evening, the chief looked up from his plate. He was a large, unhurried man, eyes that saw everything and showed nothing. He looked at Amara for 3 full seconds. Then he turned to Lady Sade and said, "Where did you find this one?" Lady Sade smiled. "She found her way, sir." The chief turned back to his food, but the corner of his mouth moved. Amara kept her face still. Her heart beat fast, fast, fast. She was being seen by the right person at the right moment. She did not notice Zina sitting across the table, watching her with quiet eyes, full of something that looked very much like a warning she already knew would not be heard in time. The chief rewarded her for the first time 2 weeks later. Zina had woken from a drowning nightmare, screaming so loud that servants came running from across the compound. She tore at her bedsheet, soaking wet with cold sweat, eyes open but unseeing. Everyone froze. Amara walked in, sat beside her, took her shaking hands, and spoke quietly into her ear until Zina's breathing slowly returned to normal. She did not leave until Zina was fully asleep again. The next morning, the chief sent for her. He gave her fine cloth, a small pouch of coins, and a longer look than he gave most things. Lady Sade spent that afternoon teaching her the shape of being useful around powerful men. When to speak, when to be silent, how to smile without agreeing, how to remain valuable without becoming a threat. Power respects strategy more than beauty, Lady Sade said. Do not forget that. That night, Amara visited Zina before bed and found her sitting up, staring at the dark wall. Without turning, Zina said softly, "He does not give favor without a reason, and the reason always costs someone else what they did not offer." She turned and looked at Amara directly. "If he truly favors you, run before he decides he needs you," the river murmured outside the window. She should have listened. One afternoon, carrying folded cloths to a storeroom at the back of the compound, Amara took a wrong turn. The corridor was cool and narrow, with the kind of silence that lives in places where things have been kept secret for a long time. At the end was a door, old wood, iron latch, sealed so tight it took both hands to pull open. She pulled it open. The room below smelled of river water and something older, ash and iron. Clay ritual pots lined the walls. River masks hung from hooks, hollow-eyed and still. On a low wooden shelf sat old rolled papers, records of names and dates. Beside each name, one word repeated over and over. Taken. 4 names, village names, girls mostly. Her finger moved slowly down the list. At the bottom of the shelf, wrapped in old cloth, she found it. A baby's bracelet, tiny white beads on black cord, the same black cord as Zina's ankle beads. The bracelet was wrapped around a small shell, white as bone, stained dark brown in the center. Her hands shook when she set it down. She replaced everything exactly as she found it, then stood alone in the dark, listening to the river beneath her feet. She did not sleep that night. The next evening, an old servant named Gemi came with her dinner and stayed longer than usual. She adjusted the lamp, the window cloth, and waited until she was certain the corridor outside was empty. Then she sat down close. Her voice was barely above breathing. "I know you found the room," Gemi said. Amara said nothing. "I found it too, 20 years ago. And I am still here because I learned quickly what happens to those who speak." She looked at the closed door. The chief's family made a bargain with the river before Zina was born. Not a prayer, a real bargain. Wealth, harvest, power, protection, everything in this compound, in exchange for a bloodline promise. Zina was born after that agreement. She was not a gift. She was the first payment installment. Amara's voice came out thin. Payment for what exactly? Gemi folded her hands carefully. Someone from the chief's house. Surrendered to the river permanently, when the river decided the time was right and came to collect. Outside, the water made a low, slow sound. Kami stood slowly, smoothing her wrapper. The river gives generously, she whispered, moving toward the door. But it always comes back to count what it is owed. She tried to convince herself she had misunderstood. She pressed the story down deep into the same quiet place inside her where she kept hunger and shame. But the river was not interested in being forgotten. 3 nights later, there was a ceremony at the water's edge. All compound members were required to attend. Drummers played. Women poured libations. Elders chanted into the dark. Amara stood at the back of the crowd, watching firelight move on the black water. One of the young drummers, a boy of maybe 16, quick hands and a wide smile, stepped too close to the bank. His foot slipped. He went in. The crowd gasped. Then the water went perfectly still. The boy rose, not swimming, not struggling, simply rose upright, arms at his sides, eyes closed, floating perfectly still like a candle on flat water. Then without a splash, without a sound, without one ripple, he sank. The crowd turned back to the ceremony, just like that, as if nothing had happened, as if a boy had not just vanished in front of 60 people. Amara opened her mouth. Lady Sadi appeared at her elbow, gripping her arm lightly but firmly. "You have already seen too much," she said quietly, "to walk away safely now." So she stayed. With each passing week, it became easier to explain to herself why. Her mother's medicine arrived in wrapped packages, paid for without explanation. Her mother's cough grew quieter. Food appeared regularly at the hut. For the first time in years, her mother gained weight. Amara told herself these were the reasons she stayed. She told herself it was for her family. But the truth was simpler and harder to face. She loved the silk and the sweet oil. She loved sleeping in a dry room with a real door. She loved the way people looked at her now, as if she mattered, as if she had always been worth noticing. She was not willing to give any of that up. So when Toma appeared at the compound gate one afternoon, voice cracking, begging her to leave and come home, she did not move. She watched from an upstairs window. The guards warned him once. He stepped forward again. They pushed him. He fell hard into the dust. He was still rising when they dragged him to the gate and threw him outside. He looked up at the window. Their eyes met. Amara stepped back into the shadow of the room and stood still until his footsteps faded completely. The feast of the dry season was the biggest gathering the compound had seen all year. Visitors came from neighboring villages. Women wore fine cloth. Food covered every table. Music played from morning until the stars appeared. Amara was placed near the front, dressed and perfumed, pouring drinks and receiving compliments. Then the whisper started. She caught it first as a look. 2 women exchanging glances when she walked past. Then a hidden laugh. Then a man leaning to another's ear. By the middle of the feast, a story had moved through the entire room. That Amara was not a helper, but a schemer. That she wanted the chief for herself. That poor girls with no name always want more than they are given. She looked at the chief. He was eating calmly, speaking to a guest, completely unbothered. Lady Said looked straight ahead and said nothing. Not one person defended Amara. She stood frozen in the center of the room with all those eyes on her, amused, cold, entertained. Then Zina appeared quietly at her side and whispered into her ear. "She fed you to the crowd," Zina said softly. So they would not feed on her instead. Within 4 days, everything had changed. The fine cloths were returned to storage quietly. The extra food stopped. Servants who had bowed to her walked past without looking up. Her warm room was needed for something else, they told her, without meeting her eyes. She was not thrown out, but pushed back to the cold edge of everything. The village heard quickly. Bad news in Omi always moved like fire through dry grass. "She flew too close," women said. "That is what happens when poor girls forget themselves." Others agreed. Her mother asked one evening, voice soft, "Was it worth it, my daughter?" Amara could not answer. She sat outside the hut that night, staring at the compound's distant lights, feeling like something important had been wrung from her chest and left nothing behind. Toma came and sat beside her without speaking. Finally, he said, "There is a woman in the swamp. People go to her when they are broken and want to strike back." He paused. "I am telling you, not advising you." He stood and walked away. Amara stared into the darkness long after he was gone. Her jaw tightened slowly. The swamp was 2 hours from the village and a different world entirely. Black water on both sides of the narrow path, tree roots rising from the mud like old fingers reaching up, oil lamps seeming to float among the reeds with no one holding them, sounds she could not name. Not animals, not wind, just sounds. Mama Ekun's hut sat where the path ended, half swallowed by the forest. Bones hung from the doorframe, clicking softly. Inside, thick smoke carried a sharp green smell that stung the back of the throat. The old woman was smaller than the fear surrounding her, thin, white-haired, quiet. She sat on a low stool and looked at Amara the way certain people do, directly, without hesitation, as if they already know the answer before you open your mouth. "You want to make them kneel," she said. Not a question. Amara stood straight. "Yes." Mama Ekun tilted her head. "Everyone who comes here wants the same thing." She studied Amara's face carefully. "And every one of them asks me the same thing next." "What is the price?" Amara asked. Mama Ekun smiled. Thin, patient, very old. "Not today," she said softly. "The worst prices always come later." She returned 3 more times before she said yes. On the 3rd visit, Mama Ekun prepared everything. A bath drawn from the river, mixed with crushed black leaves that turned the water dark. Amara stood inside it a long time, shaking, not from cold, but from something larger, like being watched from every direction. Then, the mark. A small cut under her tongue, sealed with river mud and ash. It stung for a full day, then went silent. Then the charm. A small cloth bundle made with river silt and 3 strands of Amara's own hair. She walked back toward the village as the sun dropped and already felt the difference. The woman at the first gate spoke to her with sudden, unexplained respect. A man who had mocked her at the market stumbled over nothing, fell hard, grabbed his throat and coughed as she passed. She did not stop or look back. That night, she held the charm in both hands and felt something settle inside her, dark, warm, and certain, like a fire that had finally found good wood. Then, Mama Ekun's last words returned. "The river has touched you now. It will ask who sent you." She pressed the charm tight and closed her eyes. Lady Sadi had always been careful, but careful people grow careless when they feel untouchable, and Lady Sadi had felt untouchable for a very long time. Amara moved slowly. A word here, a quiet question there. She did not accuse directly. She simply made the right people curious at the right moments. One servant remembered a sum of the chief's money for a village project that had never arrived. Amara asked careful questions. Another recalled jewelry returned late from a city trader. Amara listened. Within 2 weeks, the story was growing on its own. By the 3rd week, it broke open loudly at the market, messy and unstoppable. 3 women arguing, voices rising, Lady Sade's hidden finances spilling into the open air. Old names surfaced. A man blackmailed into silence for years finally spoke. Lady Sade's image cracked, then shattered. The crowd turned on her fast, hungry, and righteous, with no memory of how recently they had admired her. Amara watched from a distance and felt something that was not quite satisfaction. Then Lady Sade, being pulled under, did what drowning people always do. She grabbed for whoever stood nearby. She pointed across the square at Amara and screamed, "Ask her what she took from the swamp. Ask her what she carried home." The crowd turned. 1 face, then 20, then everyone. Amara had been standing at the market's edge, watching quietly. Now she was standing at the center with nowhere to move. Someone said, "Swamp woman." Someone else said, "Charm." A third voice said, "Cursed." The words spread like fire on dry ground, outward in every direction. She tried to speak. Even those she had recently helped stepped backward. The chief sent word that afternoon. She was not welcome at the compound. The compound doors did not open when she knocked. Servants who had smiled at her for months now passed without lifting their eyes. By evening, the village said she had brought something dark into Omi, that the river had been restless since she arrived, that bad things follow poor girls who reach beyond their place. Amara stood at the edge of the village with her hands at her sides and breathed slowly. Then a new sound reached her. Not gossip, not whispers, screaming from the direction of the river. She ran without thinking, feet finding the path automatically, chest tight, breath short, and when she reached the water, she found what they were screaming about. Zina had vanished again, and the whole village, turning together, said Amara's name like an accusation. She ran along the riverbank even as the village shouted behind her. The night was moonless and thick. Her feet found the path by memory alone. Roots caught her toes. Branches scraped her arms. She followed 3 things. Wet footprints in the red earth. Broken black beads scattered like seeds. and torn royal cloth snagged on the reeds. Soaking and dark. The water ran beside her, unhurried and black. She ran until the village sounds disappeared completely. Then she found her. Zina was half buried in thick reeds far downstream, body pressed into the soft bank, hands flat against the mud as if she had been trying to push herself free. She was alive. Her lips moved before Amara even reached her. "It will not let me stay below," Zina whispered. "Every time I go down, it brings me back. Like it cannot decide." Amara dropped to her knees in the cold mud. "Can you stand?" "Not yet." Zina turned slowly. "I know about your charm, Mama Ekun's mark." Her voice was quiet and even. "And I know something else. About who was truly promised to the river." The water nearby made a slow, circular sound. Zina looked at Amara directly. "It was never me," she said. Amara sat back in the mud and stared at her. "The bargain my father made," Zina said slowly, "was not supposed to use someone from his household. The river never asked for a chief's child." She swallowed. "He was meant to offer someone from a poor family. A family that would carry the hidden debt without knowing, without ever agreeing. But my father shifted it. He put me forward as a substitute to protect himself. Like a man who owes a debt and quietly writes someone else's name on the paper. The river keeps returning me because I am the wrong offering, not because it wants me to survive, but because the bargain is still open." The night sat very still around them. Amara's voice came out flat. "Which family?" Zina did not rush. The river made its low sound. Reeds shifted without any wind. "I was borrowed," Zina said quietly. "That is the whole truth of my life. And the family the river has always been watching, the one carrying the real hidden debt all along." She looked at Amara with eyes that had nothing left to hide. "That family is yours." The world went completely quiet. Just the river. Just Zina's breathing. Just Amara's own heartbeat, slow and heavy, like a drum played under dark water. She thought of her father, drowned in this same river when she was 7. Everyone had called it an accident, a fisherman's death, the kind of sad thing that happened to poor men on the water. She thought of her mother's long illness, no clear explanation, just a pulling and pulling at a once strong woman until she became thin and hollow and tired. She thought of the bad harvests, the broken nets, the debts that never cleared no matter how hard they worked. Not bad luck, not fate, payment. Then footstep came through the reeds behind her, slow and certain. Mama Ekun stepped from the darkness, white hair loose, oil lamp casting long shadows over the mud. She looked at both of them without surprise. The way someone looks when they have been watching for a while and waiting for exactly this. She tilted her head slowly. Then she said it, quietly, with something almost like satisfaction in her old voice. "Now the river knows your face, Amara." The lamp flame did not move, not even once. The river began to rise that night without any rain. By morning, the water had climbed 3 feet above its banks. The red earth shore disappeared under dark, still water. Dead fish washed ashore in dozens. No wounds, no rot, mouths wide, eyes fixed at the sky. Inside the village, voices came from the water, not loud, not screaming, just sounds. Familiar, human, impossible. A mother heard her son, who had vanished months ago. A man heard his wife say his name. Children pressed ears to the ground near the bank and ran away crying. Amara sat in her family's hut and understood everything. The charm had not protected her. It had named her. The river was not angry at her for visiting Mama Ekun. It was satisfied, because reaching for that power had confirmed what it already believed. She was the one, the debt-bearer. The family her father had written into a bargain she had never agreed to. Her entire journey, the compound, the charm, the revenge, had walked her closer to the river all along. Mama Ekun had known from the beginning. She had not helped Amara escape anything. She had simply walked her to the door. Now, one choice remained. Offer Zina, offer herself, or tell the truth before all of Omi. She chose to tell the truth. At dawn, she walked to the village square. No charm, no silk, no borrowed beauty, her plain wrapper and her own face. She spoke. She told everything. The bargain, the hidden room, the list of taken girls, the bracelet around the dark-stained shell. The young drummer swallowed by the river while the ceremony continued. The chief tried to shout over her. He used the old words: jealous, liar, witch, poor girl. But the river came. It entered the square, slowly, silently, rising between them like a wall that had always been coming. Amara dropped the charm cord into the water. "It is finished," she said. The water took the chief. He stepped back once, twice, and the river closed around him. Zina walked to the bank. The water did not pull at her feet. The black beads fell from her ankle and sank. Amara was found on the shore an hour later, alive. Her hair had gone white at the front. Her voice never rose above a whisper again. But she was alive. And Omi finally knew what had been feeding its river. Every year when the rains came, they left offerings at the bank, not from fear, but from memory, for the girl who told the truth. What would you have done if you were Amara? Did the chief deserve what the river gave him? And do you think the price Amara paid was fair? If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe for more tales like this one, because some truths are too important to keep quiet.
If this story touched your heart, please share it with someone who needs to be reminded. These things quietly change the world. Another story is coming very soon. Subscribe and turn on your notifications so you don't miss it.